Good morning, everyone, to the virtual gardening class. Today's topic is water-saving turf care and turf substitutes. My name is Pandora Estrada, and I'll be your facilitator today. I'm a water safety education instructor here at the SCV Water, and we do water educational programs for grades K through 12. I have a few slides that I need to get through before our main presenter, Steve Williams. So let us start. Okay. Okay, so we're on Zoom. Everybody got here, wonderful. If you registered for a class through December 20th, for December 2021, you'll need to re-register. Emails have been sent to everyone. If you have any questions, you'll be able to contact Casey Gordon at her email address, which is also available in the chat. So Zoom is a little different. So let's do a quick housekeeping. The class will be about 45 minutes with 15 minutes of question and answers. At the bottom of your screen, there should be a place, a toolbar, and there, the little one that says Q&A. You may ask your questions anytime during the presentation. And Steve, would you like to take a break after the turf section and answer questions then for just turf questions?
We can do that, sure.
Okay, so we'll take a break in the middle, answer turf questions, and then move on to turf replacement. There's also a chat that you can chat with me if you have any questions as well. Okay, my slide is, there we go. SCV Water, who are we? We are a, we are a full service regional water agency located in Santa Clarita Valley. We provide water to service to 195 square miles, 74,000 retail customers, and 273,000 total population served. So, oh my goodness. Right now we are experiencing an exceptional drought. We're on record right now to have one of the driest years ever on record in history. So we all need to do our part to try to conserve and save water. If you visit Drought Ready, scv.com, there are all kinds of water saving resources, rebates, and tips. And everyone needs to do our part to try to reduce our water usage by at least 15%. Some of those programs are rebate programs. You can save water and money with the rebate programs, and you'll find them on our website as well. The Smart Irrigation rebate is one of those programs. You can save up to $150 and then use your smartphone to manage your irrigation from anywhere. That's pretty cool. Another program that you can participate in is called Water Smart Workshop. If you complete the workshop, you'll get a $20 credit on your water bill, and you'll learn how to read your water bill, identify and fix leaks, as well as other common issues, water issues in your home. So it's very useful. And there are also many landscape resources. Last month, we talked about 30 plants that thrive here in SCV, but there are also links to different self-guided landscape tours, steps to replace your lawn, watering guide, watering devices and types, common irrigation challenges, and you can find that all on our website. So our website is, find us on the web, yourscvwater.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we even have some videos on YouTube. So we are ready for the main event. Welcome to Water, Turf Care and Turf Substitutes. Our presenter today is Steve Williams. He's received his horticultural training at Mount St. Antonio College in Walnut, California. He honed his skills at Descanso and Huntington Botanical Gardens, where he worked as garden staff and nursery manager for over 10 years. He has been affiliated with UCC Master Gardener since 1996, and he is recently retired from teaching at Mount Sac. So welcome, Steve. Let me stop my share and you can take over.
Thank you, Pandora.
Sure.
See here.
So I'm going to disappear for a little while and you've got controls.
Okay, I'm trying to, oops, hang on a minute here. There we go. Let us get us to our full screen. There we go. So it's my pleasure to be here today presenting for you again, and it's good to be on Zoom. I think it's, I've been using that now myself for over a year. I actually am still teaching part-time, but I'm just teaching one class now at Mount Sac. Whoops, we lost our screen share. Let's come back again here. Try that again. Okay. So today we're going to be taking a look at turf care and then turf substitutes. As Pandora was saying, with this present situation with our scarcity of water, looking at ways to save water in your landscape, and turf replacement is one of those. So let's, as we go forward here, let's see what's going on. There we go. So turf grass or lawn uses the most water in your landscape. So if you reduce the amount of turf that you have, you obviously are going to reduce your water usage. And that's what we're trying to instill in you. These turf substitutes that we'll be looking at in the second part today use less water typically, and they're a ground cover type of effect. Now, if you are putting grass in, there are some that use less water. We'll talk about those as well. And we'll also then talk about practices that you can do to have healthier lawn. Of course, watering properly, maintaining your lawn so that it doesn't have stress. It's going to be a healthier lawn. It's going to look better and be a healthier lawn if you take care of it properly. So we have different kinds of turf or grass. They're divided into two general categories: cool season and warm season. So the cool season lawns typically stay green year round. They do require the most water, and definitely during the hottest part of the summer is when they require the most. Your warm season grasses typically go dormant in the winter. They turn brown, and of course their water needs then at that time are very small. And anymore, we're not getting a lot of winter rainfall anyway. So you would need to be adding additional moisture to that cool season lawn. Your warm season grasses in the wintertime, we let them be dormant. So they're using 25% less water than a cool season lawn, your warm season grasses. So let's take a look here at the type of root systems that they have. We just added this slide because it's important to note that some of your grasses, your tall fescues typically have a root system that just goes down. It doesn't have any invasiveness to it. When we start looking at some of our other types of lawn, what we'll talk about here in a few minutes, your Bermudas and St. Augustines and so on, they have root systems that can be a little invasive. So rhizomes. Rhizomes are a root system that grows underneath the soil, and it just keeps creeping and growing, and then it sprouts new growth, and it just continues and keeps to grow. Now, your stolons are above the ground, and similarly, they creep above the ground. They set down roots at the nodes, and then they send up new growth, and they continue to grow. So this is great in cases where you have difficulty maybe rooting or growing plants. But if you try to remove a lawn that is either a rhizome or stolon, be careful how you remove it, that you get all of these pieces out. These runners, as they were, can wreak havoc in growth. They'll continue to grow and be there forever. We're going to talk about removing turf in just a few minutes. So let's go back here to our cool season grasses, your tall fescue type of lawns. They're very popular, marathon type lawns. And the thing about them, let's take a look here at the growth through the seasons. During the wintertime, yes, they are green, but they do go semi-dormant. And you can note here, the growth is much less. And also the root system during that winter time isn't as extensive. Now, as we come into springtime, we get new green growth and the shoot growth, and also we get additional root growth. Then the hottest part of summer goes to a semi-dormant state. And then in the fall, right now, it becomes more active again with the root system as well. And then into wintertime, a little bit more dormant, but we still have green growth. So we're talking about our ryegrasses as well. And ryegrasses can be grown perennially. Some folks will overseed with an annual ryegrass when their warm season grasses go dormant in the wintertime. Kentucky bluegrass, and oftentimes you'll get mixes that will have in them mixtures of these marathons, for example, have the Kentucky bluegrass mixed in with it so that you'll have a good color throughout the year. And there are several different manufacturers that sell their tall fescue grasses. There's Marathon, Medallion, Centennial are some of those names of those brands of turf. So again, remembering that these particular cool season grasses are going to use the most water because they require more water in the wintertime. So bluegrass, ryegrass might be mixed in with them. Typically, the marathon or the tall fescue doesn't need as much fertilizer to keep it looking good. It has good disease and insect resistance. It is deep rooted, but again, it does require constant water through the hottest part of the year. Now, on a tall fescue cool season lawn, you want to make sure that you keep the grass blades taller. So when you mow it, you want to set the blades higher, and particularly when it's actively growing in the spring through summer, and up to 4 inches in height. So it's recommended that you mow more often, but keep the blades much higher. And what this is going to do, of course, is having the taller grass blade, it's going to shade the soil and prevent water loss. For one thing, it's prevent evaporation. And the grass lawn needs to be taller so that it can take in sunlight and photosynthesize properly. So keep your tall fescue, cool season grasses mowed much higher than some of the other turf. So here we have a picture of this type of a lawn here, and it is a beautiful green lawn. It does, again, require the most water. So your warm season grasses. Your warm season grasses, your hybrid Bermudas, we have St. Augustine, we have zoysias, and these are often they're grasses that are mowed much shorter. And as you can see that they do have this winter dormancy here, where they actually turn brown. And again, the root system then at that time is not actively growing. We come into spring and summer, we get the green growth, we get the root growth, and this is when it requires the most water. So we don't have to supplement these warm season grasses during that dormant time during the winter when they are brown and dormant. So these are very tough lawns. They, again, do use less water than the tall fescues. They can stand drought, full sun. They don't do very well in the shade. They have fairly good, this Bermuda has fairly good insect and disease resistance, and it can recover from injury. They don't require much nitrogen to keep them effectively and actively growing. So one thing I mentioned about these, and for example, this hybrid Bermuda, it spreads by rhizomes. Now the rhizomes are the one that are underneath the soil. So you have to have some sort of a border to keep them from continuing to take over your entire property. They also develop what's called thatch, and we'll talk about that in a moment, how you can rent equipment to remove that thatch. So these hybrid Bermudas and these other warm season lawns typically need regular mowing every 5 to 7 days when it's warm. And we are mowing them much shorter, as I said, up to a ½ inch in height and so. And here we can see the Bermuda grass. It effectively looks great during the warmer time of the year. During the winter time, this lawn would brown out. Now, I myself had a St. Augustine lawn here for years. And now St. Augustine spreads by stolons, which are above the surface. Okay. Now, let me show you here. Let's talk about here's our St. Augustine. It's in high use areas. It's a coarser texture than would be your hybrid Bermuda. It can take salt spray near the ocean. It does require the irregular mowing at about 1/2 inch again. And it tends to brown out sooner than the hybrid Bermudas do during the wintertime. Now there's a third one here, which isn't always desirable, and it's Kukuyu. And Kukuyu is actually something that was brought here into Southern California in 1918 for erosion control, and it escaped and got out of hand. And therein lies the problem of bringing in non-native plants or animals and how they can become invasive. And here we have the difference between St. Augustine and the Kukuyu, so you can recognize them. The St. Augustine has blunt tips on the edge of the blade. And again, it's got the stolons that are going to be spreading above the surface. The Kukuyu has long blades that are pointed on the end, and they have hairs, okay? There's no hairs on the St. Augustine, there's hairs on the Kukuyu. And the Kukuyu spreads by both rhizomes and stolons. Now, this is important, especially if you ever come to the time when you want to remove one of these turfs, that you make sure you remove all of those rhizomes and stolons on these lawns, or they will reproduce from those again. So we're going to talk a little bit about removing them here in a moment, but here's the St. Augustine lawn. And notice the ends of these blades here. They're looking browned out. And we're going to talk about mowing here in a moment as well, but you want to be sure to have a very sharp blade on your lawnmower to get a good clean cut. And when you do, it's going to have a better look. So here we are mowing. The mowing height varies according to the type of turf that you are growing. The tall fescue cool seasons, of course, want to be about 4 inches. Your other warm seasons want to be much shorter. And never remove any more than 1/3 of the blade of grass when you mow. You know, and this rule of thumb carries over to other work that you do in your garden. When we prune our plants, our trees, etc., the rule of thumb is to never remove any more than 1/3 as well. And a good time, of course, to do the pruning on your shrubs and so on in the garden is as we're getting into fall and winter time. As it's cooling down, it's a good time to do that work as well. So in the summertime, when turf is actively growing, whether it's cool season or warm season turf, is when you'll be doing most of your mowing. Now, during the wintertime, of course, you will need to continue to mow those cool season tall fescues, but they all need mowing in the summer as they're actively growing, and never more than 1/3, and making sure that you have a good sharp blade. We'll show you what a dull and sharp blade look like in a moment. So then we have that theory of mulching the lawn, using a mulching lawnmower, and allowing those grass clippings to remain in place. And there's pros and cons on that. Yes, the lawn itself the grass is high in nitrogen. So if we cut it and put it back to the grass, we're giving it its nutrient that it needs most, which is nitrogen. But sometimes it isn't very good looking, and they can dry out, and they can be left on the surface. It doesn't look good. They can actually maybe cause some disease problems. But if you have the proper mulching lawnmower that cuts those bits up very, very fine, it should shoot it down to the soil line and be on the surface of the soil, not on the surface of the grass that you've just cut. And, you know, it's possible over time you're going to build up too much of this and it has to be raked out and removed, but it's going to serve as a mulch to help prevent loss of moisture. It's going to give nitrogen to the plants by putting it right down to the root zone. So consider it. Now, remember, the taller the grass is, like the marathon grass, the longer or deeper the root system that it has. We're calling it a root to shoot ratio. So as I just said, these taller grasses shade the soil, reduce water evaporation. And so keeping those marathon lawns at that 4-inch level during the hottest part of the summer will save you water. There are other substitutes we're going to see in the second part today that are taller And they, again, do the same thing. They're going to shade the soil and prevent loss of moisture through evaporation. So always keep those blades high on those tall fescues. They're going to be healthier, and they're going to save you more water by shading the soil. Okay, as I mentioned, sharp blades on your lawnmower. A sharp blade makes a clean cut. A dull blade has a ragged cut. And the difference is it's going to look poor, but also these ragged edges here present a place for diseases to enter that lawn grass much more readily than they were if it was a clean cut. So make sure your lawnmower blades are always sharp. And, you know, I might throw something out here that's many of you would maybe have services that come out and mow the lawn for you. Note that when they mow one lawn, particularly if it's one of our warm season lawns that have rhizomes and stolons, they can bring bits of those rhizomes and stolons back to your lawn when they mow and leave them there. And soon, in your beautiful marathon lawn, you're going to have a mixture of your warm season lawn as well. I know people who have had issues with this. My suggestion was that they buy their own lawnmower and have the service use their lawnmower, and they did that. Another way would be if these services would wash off their equipment before servicing your lawn, but they don't do that. So you always run a risk that you may get mixed turf over time if you have a outside service doing your lawn care. All right. So dethatching, we talked a bit about this. This is where the turf builds up dead roots down in here and excess dead material that needs to be removed. So there is equipment that we can rent, and on a daily basis, these dethatchers come through and they will then break out that material. We rake that out and dispose of it, and consequently, we're going to have a healthier lawn come next spring. So this thatch is this removal of this organic material. It's a renovation when this thatch stuff is about an inch thick at the surface of the soil. Now, this may be from a mulching lawnmower over time, wanting to come back and remove that. So a cool season thatch removal should be done at the beginning of the cool season, October, November, December. And your warm season grasses when they in early spring, right before they're getting ready to turn green again. So we can use this equipment, this verticut mowers or flail mowers as they're called, that go in just down there and remove this debris. And then of course you need to rake it out so you don't leave it there on the surface. Now, there's something else that we can do. It's aerating our soil, particularly if you have heavy compacted clay soil and we want to allow the moisture to penetrate better, as well as oxygen and nutrients. We can rent an equipment here that goes through and removes plugs. And these plugs are, oh geez, maybe 3/4 of an inch by an inch. And it will remove these, and they'll be all over the surface of your soil. You want to come in and rake those off. And then I like to come through with a topper or a fine compost and rake it over that surface so that it fills in these little plugs that you've removed. And then over time, your root system is going to be much happier. It's going to have more oxygen, and nutrients are going to get down into that root system as well. So if your turf has not looking its best, this may be an answer for you to improve that compaction. So dethatching and aeration are wonderful things to improve your turf. These cores, as I said, about a 1/2 inch in diameter. We oftentimes will also maybe bring in the fertilizer at the same time and rake that through to land in these little plugs that we've removed. Particularly phosphorus is an important nutrient for them in the fall when we'd be doing this process. Okay. So turf grass does require nutrients to look its best. And so these nutrients are going to make it a stronger area so that it's more resistant to injury and can recover from injury. And it'll increase the rooting depth as well. So nitrogen is the most important nutrient, the primary nutrient for our turf. And this is what gives grass that good green color. Phosphorus is promoting root growth and shoot development. And then iron is another nutrient that's important to help with color, especially during the warm months. We have a difficulty here because our pH of our soil is so high that the iron is bound up or locked up and can't be utilized or released to the plants. So that's why we can come through and we can benefit by using an iron supplement in the warmer time of the year. So we don't want to use a lot of fertilizer because that means that you're going to get a lot of growth and you require more water as well. Actually, 2 times a year of an organic fertilizer is all we really need. And that may be, early spring and midsummer. And the manufacturers of your fertilizers, of course, are going to tell you otherwise. They're going to want you through the warm season every month to be fertilizing that lawn. Again, for us here, it's really going to be excess growth and require more water that we don't want to apply. So here's that bag of fertilizer. Notice that the levels of these 3 primary nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, are equal in this one here. And they're fairly low levels because we don't want to give it too much of at one time. It's better if they get more even, lower amounts to have more consistent growth. Okay. So removing some turf. Now, if you have area that you're considering because you maybe do your part at saving water, and for you reducing your bill as time, because you know that of course that more water means higher water bills, but doing your part to help with the situation, the problem that we have right now with our drought. And there's actually ways that we can do this. I'm going to tell you here before we move into our ground covers 4 turf removal methods. And one of those would be the big dig method, where you hire a crew to get out there and simply scrape off that top layer of your turf and then remove it, haul it away. The problem with this is that you're going to get inconsistent depth that they're going to dig down. If you have one of your turfs that your warm season lawns that has either stolons or rhizomes, they may get left behind and they'll regrow from that. So the big dig method is a lot of work and it may not be the best in the long run. Layering. Layering is where we're going to take this turf area and not use any chemicals, but we're going to take several layers of cardboard or 5 or more layers of newspaper and cover this entire area. On top of that, we're going to put 4 to 6 inches of an organic mulch. And then we're going to let it just sit. And in about 2 months, the turf should be dead. And what you'll actually want to come do then is dig down where you're going to plant your new plants. Just dig a hole and plant your new plants. Leave the old cardboard newspaper that had decomposed. Leave the mulch there and proceed with your new planting. Next method is called solarizing. And solarizing is where your turf area needs to be mowed very short. Then we want to deeply water it. Then we're going to come in with clear plastic, not black, but clear plastic, and cover this entire area. And on the edges, maybe weight them down with rocks or soil so that it makes a seal. So you have your turf is cut short, you've watered heavily, you're putting clear plastic over it, and you're going to let it sit for 6 weeks. And the plastic, what's going to end up here is that the heat, and this has to be done during the hottest part of the summer, so allow 6 weeks toward the beginning of the summer for this to take place, and it's going to cook that grass and its roots. The problem is you've got the plastic that you're left with, and the plastic has to be taken to the landfill, and we're trying to reduce plastics these days. So solarizing is kind of the bottom of the list now. Well, here's another one that's pretty low on the list anymore, is using herbicides, such as Roundup, the glyphosate, and you've heard, of course, the possible risk and cancer scares with that. So that's pretty much off the table, but it is still being used. And also I'm going to give you the basics of the use of Roundup. In the area that you're treating the turf that you want to kill, you want to thoroughly water that area. I do like to remember you want that grass to be actively growing when you're using a glyphosate or a Roundup product. So we're going to water thoroughly. We're going to do this when the temperature is above 80 degrees. You want to wear your proper protective clothing, mask, etc., that it says on the product. And spray in the morning when there's less air movement so that we won't have drift onto other plants. We spray the turf down and then you let it sit for 3 days and you do nothing. After 3 days, you start watering that turf area again so that it can be actively growing. And this then helps translocate the Roundup material from the blade of the grass down to the roots to kill the grass out. So then you come in with a rented turf cutter and cut down this, cuts underneath the root area, and you roll this stuff up and put it in a bin and roll it away, and it's gone. Now, you usually have to repeat this process more than once because you're going to get sproutings that come up. So I would then continue to water, let it sprout, come in and do a second or maybe even a third treatment of your Roundup or your herbicide. Again, that's pretty much off the table now, at least for homeowners because of the risk of cancer. But I wanted to relate to you that there are ways that we can handle removal of turf. All right. So, Pandora, do we want to, are there any questions that we have?
We do not have any questions at this time. So calling out for questions. Anyone have a question they can put in the Q&A tab? We'll give them a second.
So we can come back if anything comes up and go ahead and go forward, okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
So let's take a look at some of these. You've removed your turf, or you have an area in your property, an open area that you want to treat with a wonderful ground cover. And there are many that we can use that are more water saving, and let's take a look at those. Here's one that's fairly new, one of the newer ones on the market. In fact, it's a patented turf out of Japan, Korapia. It's really quite wonderful. This product can be bought in flats, or we can get plugs, and we'll talk about planting those in a minute, but it'll spread about 6 feet. So the height of it, if you don't mow it, it can grow to about 6 inches, but it can be mowed regularly at about a 1-inch height. So it can serve as a turf replacement. It's very durable, can take some light traffic. It does have these small leaves, and then it has little pink or white flowers May through November. It does benefit from this mowing, and then a little bit of a fertilizer while it's being established, a slow released balanced fertilizer. This ground cover can take full sun to port shade. It can be used as a ground cover or as turf substitute. It takes a variety of soil types from well-drained to heavy clay. If we're planting by plugs, we would plant these little plugs 18 inches apart, and it's going to fill in. The problem with planting from plugs is that while you're waiting for the material to grow in, you run the risk of weeds setting foot and taking over an area. So when you plant any kind of a ground cover from plug, you have to stay on top of the weeding situation until that ground cover fills in, or you're not going to have a satisfactory result. We can purchase sod, which would be total coverage of the area. It's going to be more expensive, of course, because this will fill in pretty quick by plug. All right. So Korapia is a great one to use. In fact, here we see a close-up of the little flowers. If you have a bee allergy, you don't want the bees there, you would mow it more regularly and you wouldn't have the flowers. It's good for erosion control on slopes. It can spread by its roots and want to keep on going. So maybe having a border in that turf area that you're placing this, or this ground cover area, so that it can't escape. But it uses 60% less water than a cool season grass does. So 60% less than that marathon lawn. It can tolerate animal urine, and it doesn't affect it. And here we show the root system. It's got an incredible root system that reaches down to about 3 feet. So for erosion control, it's spectacular for hillside areas. And here you can see they've taken this steep hill here with plugs and that it's filled in here totally. So in your own property, considering it for erosion control, also with this deep root system, of course, during times of drought, it can draw upon the water that is down deeper in the soil because water moves through the soil, all right? And these roots can reach down to it. So Korapia, I can't say enough about it. I have several customers that have used it satisfactorily. Potentilla, or Scenic Foil, as it's commonly called. Typically a ground cover that's 3 inches to 6 inches. It will spread 15 to 18 inches. So again, we can plant plugs and it will fill in. It's very durable, can take some foot traffic. It has these small clumped leaves and these metallic colored yellow flowers in the spring and summer. So the Potentilla, the Scenic Foil, and it also can take mowing. And in the springtime, this will promote new growth and new flowering to take place. Then after you mow, you'd want to give it some fertilizing. This would then promote this to take place. It'll take full sun to part shade. It's susceptible to mites, and mites are an insect that can cause some damage. And rust is an airborne fungal disease, so somewhat susceptible. Again, a ground cover or turf in transitional areas from sun to shade, it can take those type of conditions. It does prefer well-drained soil. So for many of you, and I know myself as well, I have very heavy clay soil. So that area would need to be amended to a certain degree to allow for better drainage. Spacing the plants 12 to 15 inches apart, they'll fill in and you'll have a nice ground cover area. Now, Scenic Foil also does have shrub varieties that can grow up to maybe 3 foot tall, but not so great for our area here. Really not the best. The ground cover is, but the shrubs themselves are not. They don't take the heat very well. So here we have another choice here, the Zoysia tenuifolia, the Korean bump grass. And this is one that can grow to 6 to 12 inches, and it will spread for 12 inches. So again, we can plant them 12 inches on center, they will fill in, and you can see it has this bumpy, clump-like texture to it. So it's not one that we would typically mow or cut back. You would plant it in an area where you would want it to just do its thing and have this bumpy-like texture to it. But it is a grass with a very fine texture. And here, not so good looking in a container, but it can take full sun, half shade, low water use. It does go dormant in cold weather. Well, yes, and where you live in Santa Clarita, yes, you do get cold winter weather, but even that is changing as global warming is taking place. Our winters now typically are warmer and warmer. It's a great ground cover or a turf substitute, or as I said, in these mounding type of a situation. Looks good in an Asian landscape design. It's good amongst large rocks or boulders. It fits in nicely there. So Zoysia Korean bump grass. You can see the fine texture on the blades of this grass. Frigerator, the ornamental strawberry. So this will grow 6 inches to 8 inches with a spread of 15 to 18 inches. It's a close relative to the edible strawberry, but if you've ever had any of this fruit, it doesn't really have much to any flavor. Dark green leaves, and it can form a nice dense mat as a ground cover. It spreads by stolons. So we've got these stolons that are above the surface, and each of the little nodes, it'll send down and root in. As you've probably seen with edible strawberries, they can spread by runners, the same thing. And these are stolons. So they have white flowers in the spring, and again, can be followed by this fruit. But now there's also, on these ornamental strawberries, there are some different colored flowers we'll take a look at in a minute. So using this as a ground cover, it can also benefit from an annual mowing in the springtime that removes that dead thatch type material. It does prefer the well-drained soil. and it can take some drought over time, less water use once it's established. And it can be used as a slope ground cover, mass planting, or turf substitute. So I spoke a little bit about rust before, and rust is this airborne fungal disease that typically you'll see on the leaf and usually on the underside, a red, we call it a pustule on the underside of the leaf. And these little pustules then can release spores that are airborne and continue that disease through the garden, okay? So removing the leaves is one of the better methods of treatment just for that. If you see leaves with rust, just remove them individually. So the Frigeria, as I said, has different varieties. We have the lipstick with bright red flowers. Pink Panda has pink, red ruby with pink, and variegated variegata. I've seen these used not only as a ground cover, but also in a hanging container where this is allowed to grow over the sides of the container with these pretty pink or red colored flowers, and can be used that way as well. So the ornamental strawberry. Festuco vena glauca, the blue fescue. You've probably seen this in use. I love that blue color on this grass. It has kind of a luminous ability to it, kind of reflects the light. It will turn a little bit of grayish brown at times, and then you can cut it back and to spur on new growth. It does have little flowers on it that aren't too noticeable, tan, that might be pink or white as well. Again, 6 to 12 inches in height and spread. So whenever we see that, we don't want to plant plants too close together. We always want to give them room to grow and grow into each other. If we overplant, then they're going to compete with each other for water, for nutrients, light, etc. So always follow the recommendations on planting so they can be the happiest plant of all. Here we have this again, the blue fescue, contrasting colors and textures for borders, ground covers, turf, used in pots, the base of the larger plant. And when it's cold, avoid overwatering. They don't take to that very well. Okay. There are some named varieties of these. Elijah Blue lives the longest. Blossober has a silvery blue color. Siskayu Blue is a taller variety that's 1 to 2 feet. And gazanias. Gazanias, height 6 to 12 inches, spread of 12 to 15, and they originate from South Africa. And there are all kinds of hybrids that have been developed in crosses of these now. They've been widely used because they have a nice flowering spring through summer in shades of yellow, orange, pink, red, white. The flowers tend to close up at night and reopen during the day, or on overcast days they'll also close up. It does demand well-drained soil. It prefers hot sun. It doesn't bloom well in the shade. It does need that sun to bloom, and makes a great ground cover on slopes. It can handle reflected heat, which means light that's bounced off of a wall and reflects back onto a plant would be reflected heat. It can be used in mass plantings as a turf substitute. Planting them 12 to 15 inches on center so that they can grow into each other. Here are some of these named varieties. The Leucolena, a trailing variety, typically yellow or orange flowers and grayish colored foliage. Moonglow, double yellow flowers. Mitsui yellow has little fats buildup. And so there's the word that with gazanias, that is my issue, is we tend to get fats buildup with a lot of our gazania plants. And over time, you get this dieback. So it is beneficial to come in and cut back your gazanias and remove this dead material to spur on new growth. Hopper King, deep orange colored flowers, more of an upright variety. Okay, so again, that's the thing about gazanias, is that they do need this cutback or thatch removal occasionally every couple of years to look their best, or they tend to then continue having more dieback. So stay on top of care of your gazanias. Another great plant here that's been in use now for a few years from South Africa. You know, we get a lot of great plants from South Africa. South Africa is one of the 5 Mediterranean regions of the world, of which we are one also. So plants from South Africa, as well as southern part of Australia, Chile, the Mediterranean bowl itself, are all these Mediterranean zones, including us here in California, where these plants can be used interchangeably. So we can find some great plants from Mediterranean regions, including Diamondia. So it's a durable plant that can take neglect. It works well in dry areas and irregular irrigation. So it has this gray colored leaf with a little whitish edge on it, and whitish on the underside, and yellowish flowers. Now, here you can see this look here, and it does again fill in and grow as a nice ground cover. The flowers are mostly during the warm weather. It is a great substitute for hot areas and where there's reflected heat. It does well between stepping stones because it can take some foot traffic. So plant the plants 12 inches on center of the plugs so that they can grow into each other. And one thing I would recommend on this is not, once it's established, not to overwater. I have a customer who has this planted around her swimming pool, and the soil that she has is such a heavy clay soil that it holds water so well that she tends to overwater it. The water, the soil is inundated, the plants are dying because it's just too wet and too heavy. So provide fairly good drainage and don't overwater once established. Now that response of once a plant is established is very important, because a newly planted plant can take up to a year to become established, whether it's a ground cover, a shrub, or a tree. And of course, a good time to plant many plants in our garden, any of those, is in the fall, when the heat of the summer is ending, right? The soil is still warm. We're coming into wintertime when the conditions are going to be easier on this plant, and maybe we'll have rainfall to help water this as it's acclimating and rooting in. But as we come into the first spring that we've planted this plant, we must continue to water that plant spring through summer for that first year. And then once we get into the second year of any of these drought tolerant plants that we're planting, or other plants in the garden, we can adjust our watering schedule to water less often. And I always like to go with the adage of deep, infrequent watering, especially on trees and shrubs, where we water less often, but when we do water, we water very deeply. And plants do very well with this. And for those trees and shrubs in the garden, the use of mulch, a good 4-inch layer of mulch around your plants will help conserve that water in the soil as well. You always want to make sure that that mulch is not mounded up against the trunk or the stem of the plant. Keep it about 6 inches away from the trunk or stem of the plant. But these are some methods that you can utilize to help conserve water in your garden. Well, here's another one here, Armeria maritima, or the sea pink. Now, this is a European origin, growing 3 inches to 6 inches in height, and it spreads 6 to 12 inches. So again, plant appropriately. And it's a plant that resembles grass. So the blades of the plant look like grass blades, but they aren't. The flowers are borne on a little stalk, and they're like a globe flower. It looks like a clover blossom in shades of pink, white, rose, and red. They're very, very lovely plants. Now, they bloom heaviest in spring and early summer, and little blooms throughout the year. Once they're through blooming, cut off those spent flower stalks. A weed eater works well for that. These as well need that excellent drainage. They will respond to regular fertilizing to look their best. And occasionally they'll need to be divided, which means they grow into each other too thickly, and we need to remove some of these clumps and transplant. They're great in mounds and mass plantings as a turf substitute, borders and rock gardens, and plant them 12 inches on center to allow them to grow into each other. So here we see there are some different named varieties of rubifolium, red winter foliage with pink blossoms, apple blossom, pale pink flowers, cottontail with white flowers, and nifty thrifty, it's a variegated form with pink flowers. Myaporium. Myaporium is an Australian plant that comes in different forms, from ground covers to shrubs, and the Pacificum will grow to about 2 inches in height. As I said, a small shrub-like plant. Whereas the parvifolium will only grow 3 to 6 inches. So it's better suited for the ground cover type material. And you can see the spread on the 2 different plants here. The taller growing one spreads 20 to 30 inches, 20 to 30 feet. The lower growing parvifolium will spread 6 to 8 feet. So it's a rapid growing ground cover, and it can be planted at wide spacings. So give it plenty of room to fill in, don't overplant. It's used for quick growth on slopes, again, to help prevent erosion. The parvifolium, again, the shorter one is better for you. It's more compact for a ground cover purpose. It's interesting, all of the Myaporium plants, if you hold one of these leaves up to the sun or to a light, you can see translucent dots in the leaf. It's really interesting, little stained glass windows, if you might want to call it. The flowers are usually white, but not very significant. And again, we do need excellent drainage on this plant, and they would certainly suffer from being overwatered. So on a slope would be an answer for that, because on a slope, the water tends to run off and doesn't really accumulate in the soil as much. Thrips are one of our insect pests that can be a serious problem, especially along the coast where the humidity might be higher. And you want to plant these plants 36 inches on center to allow for that quick coverage. And again, they will fill in rather quickly. So there are different named varieties of these as well. The Puta Creek is more upright. Burgundy carpet is nice because it has this red colored stem on it, which gives more diversity in your landscape. Pink has pink flowers. So here's one more. Thymus Arcticus, the mother of thyme. Mediterranean region, as many of these herbal type plants are. Height is only 3 inches, a spread of 24 inches. It's a compact plant with small leaves and aromatic foliage, shades of white, pink, red, purple, and lavender flowers. And the mature plants can appreciate every couple of years to maybe be sheared back and cut back to spur on new growth. They demand well-drained soil, makes an excellent ground cover, good between stepping stones. In fact, there are different named varieties of thymes, and there's even like a lemon thyme. And using that between stepping stones, as you touch this with your feet, you're going to get that scent emanating of a lemon scent coming up from this plant, which is really delightful. And thyme itself, in culinary purposes, really packs a wallop of flavor. Full sun, spaced 12 to 15 inches apart to allow the plants to grow together. And creeping thyme here, the albus is the white flower, cocinium is a purple-red flower, and creeping pink is a pink flower. Okay. So I've covered some turf questions and issues. I've covered some good ground covers for use. And you, of course, can contact the Santa Clarita Valley Water for more information, and their website as well that Pandora was telling you. So let me stop my share here. And are there any questions or anything?
Okay, Steve, we have one question, and I will read it to you. My front yard grass is patchy and dying, has been dying for the past 7+ years. My backyard is all dirt. Do you offer professional assessments of yards and help with planting grass and plants, or can you recommend someone who can come to my house and get my grass to grow? I live off Copper Hill Drive.
Well, see, I personally don't. You know where I live? I live in the East San Gabriel Valley. So I'm a little ways from you guys. And I actually teach here at a college over here, Mount San Antonio College, and I am teaching the one class here. So I don't do any consultations these days. And as far as that, you might know in your region there, Pandora, if there's any companies that do it, or nurseries. I don't know of, I know that there are some nursery outfits who do provide that type of service. You're going to have to just check and see, because I don't know offhand. I'm not from that area. All right, can't help you.
No worries. Okay, anyone else have a question? We'll give it one more second to see if anyone posts a question in the Q&A section.
Yes, we covered everything.
I think you did a great job.
You know, there's these were a few good choices of ground covers and some of the newer ones that are being used. So consider those. Consider reducing your turf, if nothing else, because of its high water use and high maintenance and the green waste that it produces. All these reasons why we can use other things instead. I see something down here in chat. Oh, okay. Looks like we're good. Nothing new.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation today. And I would also like to invite everyone to next month's meeting on October 16th at 9 a.m. And we'll be discussing perennials and natives for Santa Clarita Valley. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.